We could probably spend we could probably do like a full semester course on the evolution of brand purpose and some of the things that went wrong along the way. But I think that just, not only at Consumer Reports, but relative to my experience at a number of other companies, brand purpose really has to start with employees. Your employees have to be very convicted around your mission, and they have to see this brand purpose or the mission or the vision play out in the work that they're doing day in, day out.
I'm Eric Fulwiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today. Hey everyone, my guest today is Khalid El Khatib. He is the Chief Marketing Officer of Consumer Reports. If you are American, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s like I did, you know Consumer Reports. You might not know what they are up to now, but now you will. So Consumer Reports is an American institution. It has been around for 88 years. It is actually the fourth largest publisher in the US. Khalid has been there for about a year, and he brings a really interesting perspective and approach to how he's done marketing and how he's building the marketing machine for this next generation of what is essentially reinventing storied incumbent organization. He was previously CMO of Stack Overflow, which you probably heard of as well. And we talk a lot about how he brings a product-led growth and a SaaS model to how he's marketing, essentially a media company. So there's a lot of good stuff in this episode. We talk about community-centric marketing, which Khalid says is the red thread in his career, but so many businesses get it wrong. We talk about the State of the Union for Consumer Reports, how they built their business, how he views employees as a key part of the media mix. And then we talk a little bit more specifically about the three key work streams of how he's divvied up his role, stepping into the CMO position a year ago, and some of the results that have come for that. So really interesting conversation, a perfect example of how you take a challenger playbook to an incumbent brand. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Khalid El Khatib of Consumer Reports. Khalid, thank you so much for making the time. How are you and how are things in Brooklyn?
Good. Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Well, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Consumer Reports, as a kid who grew up in Boston in America in the 80s and 90s, is a brand that, of course, I'm very familiar with. But I will say, and this is in part due to being an expat living over here in the UK for the last 9 years, not one that I'm as familiar with in terms of where you all are right now. However, it's fascinating just to understand and relearn the scale of the business. And I know that you are bringing a really interesting and different perspective and playbook to what you're doing as CMO there now. So really excited for the conversation. Let's get into it. Before we talk about Consumer Reports, the question that we ask every guest, could you please give us a challenger brand that you are particularly passionate about right now and why?
Can I do two or do I have to do one?
Please.
Okay,
No, we
great.
could spend the whole recording on this if you want to.
I think one media brand that I have tremendous respect for is New York Magazine, and of course that's my bias being a New Yorker, but I think that what they've done is so brilliant in terms of both the differentiation of the brand into sub brands like Vulture, like The Strategist, but they've also done a really extraordinary job of email. And I think a lot of media brands, they need to embrace email, just given the direction in which everything is moving. And what New York Magazine has done so well is, in particular for me, someone who really enjoys television every now and then, they've done a great job of catalyzing conversation with their reporters who are doing recaps of shows, sort of putting together like book clubs, but for film and television. So I love that, and I'm a big fan. There's like a show that I'm watching on Netflix right now, and I'm actually excited for every episode to end so that I can go read the recap on Vulture.
What show is that?
It's Black Doves, the spy
yeah.
show.
Karen
It's set in London actually at Christmas. Quite good. And then the other brand that I think a lot of marketers really admire what the team has built is Duolingo, and I think that they have just really leaned into social media in an extraordinary way that's very brand safe relative to what we've seen with some other brands and how they've gotten a little too crazy perhaps. But what I also love is what's happening right now around Squid Games too. Again, Netflix, a show that's coming out in around the holidays, I believe, and they've launched a partnership with Netflix whereby the Duolingo logo, an owl, I think, is dressed as one of the Squid Game's characters or mascots, and it's all about learning Korean or else. And so I think they have a lot of fun with the brand, but again, not to the detriment of their value proposition. And they built such tremendous brand equity in like, I don't
Yeah.
know, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. It really is amazing. And I almost feel like they were around for a bit and then all this brilliant marketing kicked in. So I don't know if there's a change at the top. Darren, we should see if we can try to find somebody who can come on the show. But they've really done a great job. And the thing that I really respect and love about what they've done that I think people listening can take away and think about what it means for their own brand is like, they're just doing interesting things. Like they're showing up in interesting, different ways. There's the marketing communication side of it, the advertising. I always say that their TikTok profile is the best business TikTok profile out there. But even things like the app screen on your phone, if you don't do it for a while, the owl face starts to melt. And if you do it for a while, it starts to heat up. You can almost like, I assume if we had the CMO on, there would be some type of hack or some type of system where the way that they come up with ideas or the way that he or she approves ideas is like, is this the way that anybody else would show up? Or has this been done before? It feels like they're really pushing to make sure that everything they do is just different, which of course, as we've seen with all the research and conversations that we've had with challenger brands, cultural relevance and talkability within the category is what drives differentiated growth. So I think that's a great one. And again, one that we could spend the whole episode talking about. But let's talk about Consumer Reports. So for those who might not know, or like myself, needed a bit of a refresh, can you give us an overview on what Consumer Reports does?
Sure. Yeah. Like you said in your introduction, Consumer Reports is an American institution. So we've been around for about 88 years, which a lot of people know because people talk about their connection to the brand through their parents or
Yep.
their grandparents.
Yep.
What not a lot of people know is that we're actually a nonprofit. And so we're a nonprofit organization based here in the U.S. Our headquarters is actually in Yonkers, just a few miles outside of New York City. That we have an office in the city as well. And a lot of people know us through our products ratings and reviews. So we have over 10,000 ratings and reviews across multiple categories, inclusive of home, things for babies and infants, and also cars. So we have tremendous brand equity and a lot of trust around cars and how we review cars. But what people don't know, again, going back to that nonprofit piece, is like many other platforms like The Strategist, which I mentioned earlier, like Wirecutter, like online reviews, whether they're on Amazon or on Google, we tell folks what to buy and what not to buy. And that's where a lot of other reviewers, competitors, people who think are competitors stop. But if we tell you not to buy something, we keep going. And so we hold manufacturers accountable. If a product is found to be unsafe or unreliable, we'll give that feedback to the manufacturer. And if they don't make changes, sometimes we'll push for legislation, especially if a product is deeply unsafe. And so beyond the ratings and reviews that people have come to know us for a long time, we also have a publication that's actually one of the 10 most popular publications in America and has been for a long time. We are increasingly getting into a space where we think about food safety. There's been an onslaught of recalls of late, a lot of really dangerous outbreaks that are affecting children. We got a lot of attention, not just in the press, but on TikTok when we pushed the government to remove Lunchables from the free lunch program here in the U.S. because they contained high levels of lead and other heavy metals. And so that type of advocacy work is just as critical as, again, the product ratings and reviews that we're so known for.
And I'm curious, I know this isn't in the script, but the way that you described it, which I love, by the way, an American institution, and then everything kind of down from there. And I think that is something that I didn't even know as someone who knew kind of the publication side of the business back when it was, just the magazines and the car reviews and things like that.
Yeah.
The purpose and the vision, I'd be curious how you think about the importance of that within your marketing and communication strategy, because of course, maybe a little bit less now, but there was the wave of like every brand needs to have a purpose. That's what consumers are looking for. Your business, of course, is one where it is truly authentic. Like that purpose is baked into who you are and how you make money, which was, I think, the problem with the whole wave of purpose-led brands is that it wasn't actually tied to how they made money and the
Mhm.
commercial model.
Yeah.
I'd just be curious, given your background, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute, but also how you described Consumer Reports and the positioning that you own. How does purpose fit into how you think about the story that you want to tell?
Well, I think it's a good question, and we could probably spend we could probably do like a full semester course on the evolution of brand purpose and some of the things that went wrong along the way. But I think that just, not only at Consumer Reports, but relative to my experience at a number of other companies, brand purpose really has to start with employees. Your employees have to be very convicted around your mission, and they have to see this brand purpose or the mission or the vision play out in the work that they're doing day in, day out. And I think that's where a lot of other companies have gone wrong. They say or they market, this is our brand purpose, this is what we stand for. And then the employees, who are doing the day-to-day work are like, I don't know about that. The marketing, the message doesn't necessarily match the work that I'm doing or marketing practices or what have you. And I think that that's where we're really fortunate. Is not only is everyone that works at the organization at Consumer Reports really convicted that we are doing really critical work. To one, we see it play out every day. When we have these wins, like removing Lunchables, or when telling folks that a car is unsafe, or even like I'll tell a friend, hey, I love this air purifier. I found it through Consumer Reports, and they're like, oh, I love it too. That sort of aha moment feels really good for folks. But the other, and I think this is one of the really cool things of the brand that we need to do a better job of showcasing, is there are really cool things happening inside the company that are cool at face value, but also a really great manifestation of the work that we're doing and our purpose. And so in Yonkers, where we're headquartered, we have a 27,000 square foot facility where we test everything from washing machines and dishwashers to robotic vacuums. And the way we test robotic vacuums is we actually have a replica studio apartment with different surfaces, carpet, wood floors, linoleum, etc. And we get cat hair from a local animal shelter to put into the carpet to see how well the robotic vacuums test. In Connecticut, in Colchester, Connecticut, we have a 327-acre car testing facility, whereby we have an autonomous testing track. We have a rock climbing wall where we can test out like huge SUVs. And we even have a branded fire truck where we can get the course wet to test how well or how well cars or tire. I don't have a car. It's obvious when I talk about cars, but how well cars and tires can handle flooding or wet weather conditions. And like my favorite day at Consumer Reports was the day that I got to drive up to the test track and test out like 25 different cars and one going like 150 miles per hour. So, I think that that's it's a long-winded answer, but it's such a great it's like a marketer's dream. Like there are so many stories that we can tell.
But I think because the thing going through my head is, yeah, it makes total sense. It's not just about the business model, but it's about the culture and the employees and people really feeling that, seeing that, believing that, and being able to promote it as well. And I know that's something we're planning on talking about later is how you actually think of employees as a key part of the marketing mix as CMO. I'm thinking about people out there who maybe aren't stepping in to an institutional brand of business like Consumer Reports, or maybe are the head of marketing and report into a chief commercial officer in a B2B business, where maybe that doesn't exist already. In terms of how you can dial up the employee part of the media mix to be more purpose-led externally and eventually in an authentic way through Marcoms, is that, I mean, what I'm getting from what you're talking about is you have to find those moments, those situations of what's already happening within the business, but intentionally try to tell that story internally. Is that right? Is there anything that you would add in terms of people listening for how to try to get their employees to support the purpose-led mission a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're articulating is really like story mining. You have to talk to people
Mm.
all of the time, and you have to ensure that people feel, either connected enough to you that they can come to you when they have an idea or a story that they think would resonate with your consumer base, or have a mechanism whereby you can collect these stories from people. The other thing that I think is really critical that, like, shockingly, I've been in so many CMO groups over the years. It was like a thing that everyone did in the pandemic, as you were part of like a cohort of CMOs. And I met so many who didn't actually use their product. And that's to
Yeah.
me like 101. It sounds super intuitive, but there are so many folks out here who don't, especially in the SaaS space. And like, you really have to drink your own champagne.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where you get so many great ideas, and you have to empower and give time and space for your team to do the same.
Hey everyone, just another quick interruption. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not already part of our AMP community on WhatsApp, would love for you to get involved. So AMP is a community that we started at the beginning of the business, really, just to kind of bring together some of the interesting people that we were talking to, the marketers that we were coming across, many of whom have been on this show as well. And so now AMP is about 300 senior marketers from around the world, from various categories, different stages, challengers, incumbents. And it's really a place where people can share questions, can share resources, can make new connections, can use folks as sounding boards. And for those that are in it, you know, it is a very vibrant community. It's really taken on a life of its own, which is amazing. So if you're listening to this and you want to get involved, please go to our website, wearerival.com. There you can find the application form or reach out to me or someone at Rival directly. Thanks so much.
Or so many CMOs that don't actually talk to their customers or don't kind of proactively, intentionally do that all the time. They'll talk to them when it comes up, but they don't view it as like a key part of their, weekly time allocation. Okay, coming back to the brief. Thank you for entertaining me with that tangent, but I think it was really interesting. Community-centric marketing. So you said in our prep call that, quote, the red thread in your career is community-centric marketing. And I think community is something that a lot of brands want to do, few do really well. And how, I guess, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, your past roles, how you kind of built this red thread of community-centric marketing, but also what are people getting wrong and what is the right way to approach this topic?
Sure. Yeah. I think so. I started my career at Teach for America, another, now American institution. I think they've been around for 25 or more years, but a nonprofit that's working to combat educational inequity by placing high achieving recent college graduates in low income areas across the country. I was not a teacher. I actually worked in communications, but what we did there, the folks who were teaching, the work that they were doing was actually just as important as what they were doing after. And so the Teach for America built a really strong and robust alumni network where when folks left the schools that they were teaching in, the hope and ambition was that they would work to change the system, whether they were then working as doctors, lawyers, politicians, etc. And that instilled in me a belief that there is so much power, and you can affect so much change by ensuring that the folks who work for you or that are touching your brand in some way never really leave the brand behind. And so I then went to an agency where TED was one of my clients. And this was, again, like 10 plus years ago when TED Talks were like the hot thing on the moment, before streaming and everything else. And what TED did so well is they fostered a community twofold. One, at the conference itself, where, a lot of high net worth, highly influential people were convening and obsessed with going every single year. And then they spread that information to folks. They empowered people to give TED Talks of their own, whether it was in local churches, community centers, or schools. And the TED brand was so, so strong for so long because people felt such a strong connection to it. And then my most recent gig was at Stack Overflow, a Q&A website for developers and technologists that where community was really foundational to everything that we did. At its peak, it was getting 100 million people visiting it every single month and people contributing to it for free, technical knowledge for other people to learn and share and grow. And my last CEO always said that community is our competitive moat. The data that we have, the products that we sell, how easy they are to be adopted within an organization only happens because people know and love the brand so much. And I think, outside of my career, like we were saying earlier, Duolingo is doing a great job around that. There's so much evangelism for the brand because people feel such a part of the community, and whether they're connecting to it on social media or the gamification piece or how they incentivize people to refer. I think that, community can mean a lot of different things, but when a brand gets it right, it can have a tremendous halo effect.
And I think one of those tremendous halo effects that I'll pull out from what we talked about in the brief call that I really liked was your point around how when you do community right, it can do the awareness job for you. And therefore, you can focus your efforts and budgets on demand gen. So I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit. And I think with kind of an angle on probably a lot of people listening as marketers are probably bought into the opportunity and upside of community. It can sometimes be hard to sell it through. So what I liked about that quote and a bit of how you talked about, your approach to community is that that's a very specific thing that you can bring to a CEO, to a CFO, to a board to be like, hey, it's not just this kind of theoretical, this is the right thing to do. Believe me, I'm trying to educate you. It is like, hey, we can reduce our awareness investment and double down our investment on demand gen and lead gen if we do this right. So I'd love for you to unpack on that quote and that element of your strategy for this.
Sure. Yeah. I think a core tenet of community is two-way communication. And so it's not enough to say, hey, you like to fly this airline, you're part of our loyalty program, and here's a bunch of incentives. You have to really give people a mechanism to give feedback and to ensure that they feel like they're building the brand and growing the company along with you. And so one example of that from my previous role at Stack Overflow is we did this like iconic developer survey every single year. It was again at its peak. I left Stack about a year and a half ago, and I was there for 6 years. And at its peak, it was taken by over 100,000 developers all over the world, and was so widely cited by folks that Google once told me that they actually built their OKRs around the results of our survey and people's evangelism for their products within it. And one of the reasons that survey was so successful wasn't just because we had a survey that, put the finger on the pulse of how tech was moving, and we asked questions around affinity for remote work and people's salaries relative to different languages they were learning, languages being technical languages or coding languages. It's because we also asked the community and the most engaged members of the community what they wanted in the survey. What were new platforms or technologies that they wanted us to include? What were cultural moments or questions that they wanted answered in the dev survey? And again, when the survey was released, people took it because they saw themselves in it. And when the results came out, they were widely shared because people felt like they were part of it. And so I think that's an example of, a lot of people have this idea of user-generated content. But it's important that the campaign is ultimately shaped by the community and that they have some say in the direction in which it moves.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a second to make sure that you knew about another podcast that we have here at Rival that's all about microcultures. Many of you have probably seen our white paper that came out recently about how challenger brands are tapping into and leveraging microcultures to drive differentiated category growth. Our Chief Strategy Officer, Lance, and our Principal of Strategy, Cecilia, host a fantastic podcast called Ripples, where they explore this whole world of microcultures, including speaking to guests from some of the brands that are doing it well. So you should definitely check it out. There's going to be a link in the show notes. You can find it on wearerival.com as well. Thanks for listening. So drilling in on kind of the state of the transformation of Consumer Reports. So you've been there for about a year, I think, and kind of coming from at least your most recent role, a bit more kind of the tech SaaS product, background.
Yeah.
Obviously the world of media, the publishing world has been, upended, just disrupted, completely changed in the last 10 to 20 years. And Consumer Reports, fourth largest publisher in the US, is probably at the middle of that. And so we talk a lot about, in conversations on this show and in the work that we do as Rival, challenger marketing or the challenger playbook as an opportunity for disruptors to scale, but also incumbents to innovate. I'd love to hear from your perspective how you're approaching that job to be done, or even if you think about it that way, maybe you frame it up differently, but how do you approach as CMO taking an established institutional brand like Consumer Reports and trying to innovate it to where the state of the industry and culture and technology is today?
Sure, I would say a couple of things. I think I believe that we need to move away from publisher and towards platform. We've had a magazine for a long time, and so people believe that we are a publisher or a media brand, and I think that we're so much more than that. Not only do we have ratings and reviews, which have been commoditized certainly, and like the affiliate wars continue to sort of eat into that product, but we have so much more than that, like the advocacy work that we're doing. We have cost saving tools like what we call Bill Negotiator, whereby an agent will negotiate bill savings on your behalf. We have a new SaaS tool called Permission Slip that puts your data privacy front and center and takes your PII away from predatory data brokers and the like. And so I think that we have to do more. We have to better articulate on the website and the mobile experience and in the app what we're doing for consumers, and we have to package it together better. And so we're actually in the multi-month process of reinventing our project experience. And, it's been a buzzy word for a long time, but I'm a big believer that product-led growth has to be front and center. And I wouldn't have taken this job if there wasn't a commitment to that and an investment that was being made in evolving the experience, because consumerreports.org is not where it needs to be today. It needs to get significantly better in order for me to continue to market it. So that's one. I'll just set that aside. The other is that we're seeing so many brands right now lean into their legacy in a big way. And it's not just because everyone loves to say nostalgia's back. Gen Z loves nostalgia. But, I think like Levi's has done a good job around this. A lot of people are really leaning in, and I think that we can as well. And so one sort of story and big focus for me in our brand campaigns that you'll see all throughout 2025 is this intergenerational link. So what I often hear from people when I say that I work at Consumer Reports is like, I love Consumer Reports. My dad introduced it to me. Or I love Consumer Reports. Like my mom always had the magazine on the counter when I got home for school. Or my grandparents still won't buy anything without checking Consumer Reports first. And what we really need to articulate to folks is that's great. Your parents loved it for a reason because it was often right and it was there for them and unbiased, but it's for you too. And so I live in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, which is like the baby epicenter of Brooklyn. My sister, who lives a block away, has a 1-year-old. And what I'm constantly saying to folks is like, look, these are the most critical purchases you'll ever make. A stroller, a car seat, a breast pump, and Consumer Reports not only rates and reviews these things, but they ensure that you have recall information when you need it, and they're holding manufacturers accountable when, God forbid, there's an infant death because of one of these tools. And, I think what we need to do is continue to tell people that we're there for them, that we're doing things like this, but also articulate the rigor with which we test things. Too often, people will see like a TikTok video or read an Amazon review that could be, fake or written by generative AI. And I go to our labs in Yonkers. I see not only the tests that we put these products through, but our car seat expert, for example, has a PhD in this field. I've been like astounded and continue to be by the expertise that our folks have. And so that's, I think where we have so much upside, and there are just green shoots everywhere, a million stories we can be telling. And I feel the tremendous responsibility, but also privilege that I can tell this intergenerational story.
So you talked about how, I think at the time of briefing, you were about 6 months into your role. And so let me know if this has changed. But you mentioned having 3 streams for how you were thinking about the role and the job to be done as a relatively new CMO within this business. So you said, first, you need to grow the existing community and engagement. Second, you need to grow the new community. The base is older. How do you bring in the next generation, which is what you were just speaking to? And the third, which I'd love to double click on, is how do you accelerate that product-led growth and applying your background from SaaS? So I'd be curious because I think it's always helpful for people to take perspectives from different categories back into their category. And that happens a lot with people that take a job in a different category. But I think it can also happen by just listening to different perspectives or almost kind of, role playing yourself as the CMO of a business in a different category. So how has that worked for you? And specifically, what are the key learnings from being in and leading a very successful SaaS business coming into Consumer Reports?
Yeah, I would say like a couple of things. One is an obsession with the P&L. I think that there's this myth. I mean, executive recruiters love to say this on their podcasts and their newsletters that you can have like a brand-oriented CMO or a revenue-oriented CMO. You can't have both, and that's just not true. I'm a creative person who is also good at math. And so, I look at the data all the time by channel, by campaign, by demographic, wherever possible. A couple of things to answer your question more directly. One, when I came in, one of the big unlocks is that we did age-based segmentation for SEM, and there was a big lift to conversion rates because of that. The reality is that 30-year-olds care about different things. They At the end of the day, like people largely care about the same things, but there is nuance, and that nuance can be significant. So an example of that relative to Consumer Reports is older people, our core members, really like this message of honesty and integrity. And younger people like it, but what they care about a lot more is recency. So, what is the latest thing that you're testing, the latest technology? Is this the latest model of things? And the unbiased part, the honesty part is important, but the first is what's going to compel them to click. So that's one. And then the other is, like you said, I think it's so critical to talk to other marketers constantly and to look at brands that are doing an incredible job and knocking it out of the park and to double click on what they're doing to see what you're not. And so one example of that for Consumer Reports is like our referral process within the product is really cumbersome, and a reflection of that is our referrals are relatively anemic as a proportion of memberships or subscriptions. So there's so much that we could be doing there, not only to accelerate the number of people that are coming in, but to lower our CAC because referrals are ultimately free. And so that's like something that I tasked the team with relatively recently is like, how do we make this better? How do we get people to gift more subscriptions? And like that's a core pillar of this intergenerational campaign that we're rolling out in just a couple of weeks is, can our older, long tenured members bring younger people into the fold, whether that's their children, their grandchildren, their godchildren, etc.
Well, I'll have to make sure to link to the new campaign because I think this episode is going to be released. We're recording in December. It's going to be
Yeah.
released in February. So we'll make sure that that's in the show notes. Go click
Yep.
it and check it out.
Yep.
You touched on the marketing mix a little bit. You mentioned how you approach changing SEM as an example. And I know that that was a big part of the marketing mix before you got there, and you've now changed it a little bit, looked at testing other channels, as you talked about, laying the foundation for growth in a different way with this product-led SaaS type of mindset. I'd be curious to understand, what have you found that's worked? How has it evolved? What are you looking at going forward? What are the biggest changes to the marketing mix that you've made and why?
Oh man, I'll try to speak to some of them in a way that is not so specific to the work that we do. But first of all, I'll just say that every marketer, whether you're a B2C, B2B, media, software, it's tough out there and will continue to be. And so I think one thing that I brought from my SaaS background to the organization is that we can't just look at like the membership or subscription number in the aggregate. We have to actually obsess over LTV. So the reality is it's going to continue to be difficult and more expensive to bring more people into the fold. So how do we more deeply engage the people who are with us and on our side? So in addition to the 39-ish dollars that they're paying for their membership or subscription to Consumer Reports, how do we evolve the product in order to compel them to donate to us when it makes sense to do so? So if there's a really critical recall that is about a food item that they're feeding their kid, can we then ask them for a $10 or $25 donation to help us continue to fight and do this type of work, thereby increasing LTV, increasing our renewal rates, increasing our referral rates, etc. So that's one. And then the other piece is, again, this isn't rocket science, but the Gen AI landscape and the search landscape continues to evolve really, really quickly, especially in the product ratings and review space. So we have to constantly think and rethink how we evolve our investment in SEM and SEO in particular, like every brand does. And some brands are paying a a number of folks, media brands who are really heavily in the affiliate space have shuttered in the past 6 months because they can't keep up with this frenetic pace of change. And so where we're seeing some success is, like everyone leaning into social media, but I'm particularly excited about Reddit. And Reddit right now is not only an investor darling, but I think a marketer darling because it's so authentic. The contextual advertising there is so strong, and they're continuing to build out their capabilities in a way that's really compelling to people as a hedge against the sort of challenges that they're seeing around search.
Hey everyone, just want to take a quick minute because we've actually heard from many of you that you want to get a better understanding of what it is that we actually do here at Rival. You know us for the content. Obviously, you're listening to Scratch right now, but everything else that we put out, the events, the community, but actually our core business, just so you know, we are a marketing consultancy for challenger brands. We partner with brands big and small to gain category share with a challenger approach. We develop and execute strategies and campaigns across 4 main areas of the marketing function: brand strategy, creative and production, paid media planning and buying, and customer data and MarTech. And then, of course, as you know, the mission that's wrapped around Rival is to understand and share our learnings about what drives the growth of successful challenger brands. That's it. Sorry for the interruption. I'll let you get back to the show.
And so within that, we've talked a lot about what you're doing from a marketing communication standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, and you mentioned, which is something, a philosophy I subscribe to the most and have seen consistently play out in all these interviews that I've done. Good CMOs are also good commercial operators. Like it should not be possible to separate those two things. And so investing in, maybe if it doesn't come as naturally to you, but like really understanding the financial operations, the commercial realities of the business is so key. The other, call it joint, where marketing needs to integrate with the rest of the business very deeply to be effective in your role as CMO is product.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you approach working with product. I know in our briefing call, you talked about how, in your opinion, most successful CMOs don't just focus on the brand work, but they work lockstep with product. What does lockstep mean to you at Consumer Reports? And what's your advice for how other marketers can do this better?
Yeah, I mean, this is so critical. So my last job, in fact, because oftentimes when there was like a breakdown or when something wasn't going well, there's often like finger pointing. If it's not the CMO to the CRO or the CRO to the CMO, then it's the CPO. And so we had actually a bi-weekly meeting, me, the CRO, and the CPO, the Chief Product Officer, where we just like troubleshot anything that was happening or that was coming up, and we talked about the things that we were working on because it was so critical that we work together. I think that's super true in any SaaS company. And at Consumer Reports, I just talked about how I think it's paramount that we unlock product-led growth and that we bring a better experience not only to our longstanding members, but to the millennials that we're trying to bring into the fold. And so I talk constantly I probably have a chat from her right now with our chief product officer. But the other sort of critical piece of the puzzle is product marketing. Every organization does this differently. At my last job, product marketing reported to me and had a dotted line to product. Here at Consumer Reports, product marketing reports up to digital or product, but they have a dotted line to me. And to me, that's the connective tissue. And I think, revenue is tremendous, demand gen is tremendously important, brand is tremendously important, but product marketing is, to me, like the hardest to get right. And among the most important. So many product marketers are glorified sales enablement folks, they're glorified brand folks, but true product marketers can be such an accelerant to the business. And I think that for me, I've been really fortunate to have great product marketing teams at every organization I've worked in, but that's where you can best build the bridge between product and marketing.
So Khalid, I know that we're almost out of time. We did not get to for even like half the brief, which is typical when it's a good conversation like this. Before I go to the lightning round, is there anything that we didn't touch on about what you're doing, your philosophy, that you want to make sure people hear, since we didn't get to all of it?
Yeah, I just think, I'll make a little pitch for Consumer Reports and hopefully the work that we're trying to articulate over the next year is that it's weird out there. We're in a weird moment. There's hallucinations in chatbots. There are trustworthy reviews on sites that we've trusted and used for a long time, and I hope that people will continue to turn to institutions like Consumer Reports. I think brands that have been there for a long time are there for a reason, and people are starting to hopefully figure that out and embrace that again. So I like everyone have a bit of like it's been a dizzying to say the least over the past couple of months in particular, but I'm really optimistic about what's ahead, and I'm excited about the stories that we have to tell.
Be curious to the extent you can share what your approach is to Gen AI. And I think it's both from like, all the content that you obviously own as a publisher. That's one part of the conversation. I think the thing that could be interesting is if you're kind of approaching the disruption of search by large language models. We talk about if it was share of search before as something that marketers needed to worry about. Now it's share of model. What is ChatGPT going to spit back when it's
Yeah.
like, what car should I buy or where should I go to get a trusted review? Is there anything you can share on kind of how you're thinking about that?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot that's happening, and so it's a little bit of hurry up and wait. But one thing I will say, I mean, that's super true. And at Stack Overflow, that was like what we were obsessively focused on, and I think they're doing a good job right now integrating themselves into the big LLMs. But we do have a chatbot called Ask CR. That is fully integrated into the site and the app experience. So, sort of moving people away from this idea of ratings and reviews and more to advice. And so it's not enough to say like that it's actually great. They use it all of the time to say like, what's the best air purifier? What you really want is like, what is the best air purifier for my 1,300 square foot apartment? I live in New York City and there's wildfire smoke and pollution in the equivalent. And so you need like a personalized, customized recommendation. And Google is not great about that yet. There's still a lot of bias. And that's where I think CR can really lean in. And we've seen, again, a lot of adoption. This is just in the process of rolling out, but will be fully rolled out by early next year.
Cool. All right. Before I let you go, quick lightning round of questions. The first one is, what was the first marketing job you ever had?
The first marketing job I ever had was more of a communications job, and that was at Teach for America.
What's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
Wake up early.
What's the best brand campaign you've seen recently?
Oof, that is tough because I have seen so many brand campaigns because we are just leaving Cyber Week. I think the Duolingo example that I mentioned recently was like the one that caught me most off guard and got me to reopen Duolingo after like 3 or 4 months. The Duolingo Squid Games collab.
What's one thing people should do differently after listening to this episode?
Thank your product marketers, or if they're not pulling their weight, find new ones.
I love it. All right, Khalid, thank you so much. We'll let you get on with your day in Brooklyn. Great time on the show.
Thanks so much.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.